feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled streaming review. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck, alongside, he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Marchin.
Feeling marvelous today, Matt. Just marvelous.
We're back, baby. It's been a little while. We've said this on every review and piece of content that we've done, but
we owe Stained at least like $100 in licensing.
We should just make that our theme song for the little while. We've been off and on for the last month and a half, 2 months, probably in between Moon Knight, the end of it, and the beginning of Ms. Marvel. We took a little bit of a forced hiatus, whether it was Eric had COVID, I had COVID, wedding stuff going on, a bunch of different things. We had little things here and there, Chippendale, another Marvel movie with Doctor Strange. But we've been kind of off, but I'm excited to be back.
We needed time to really recover from the gravitas that is Anson Mount, really.
Yeah. We're back in the Marvel Studios mindset, as today we are reviewing spoiler-free the first 2 episodes of Ms. Marvel, which is premiering on Disney Plus on June the 8th. Wednesday, June 8th. And then it's a wild time. There's so much TV right now, especially when it comes to big popcorn entertainment stuff and some superhero stuff. And you got The Boys right now. You have Obi-Wan streaming. Obi-Wan and Ms. Marvel are going to be on the same day on Wednesdays, which is just too much almost. You got to get up at here on the East Coast at like 6 a.m. if you don't.
I thought that they were doing it like Obi-Wan was going to be like before midnight or at midnight.
They only did that for the first couple episodes, and then they went back to the 3 a.m., 12 a.m. on the West Coast, 3 a.m. here on the East Coast. But anyways, Ms. Marvel, June 8th. I believe it's the first 2 episodes, right, that they're dropping on that day, or is it just the first one?
Look at us, well informed.
We should know. Anyways, we're reviewing the first 2 episodes, spoiler-free, just basically our first impressions of the show. If you've listened to one of our streaming reviews before, when we're only covering a few episodes, we're not going to give it a numbered score or anything like that. We're just going to kind of talk about how we felt about those first couple episodes and how excited we are for it moving forward. So, Eric, we've had a little bit of time now. I mean, Doctor Strange came out May 6th, right? The beginning of May.
Yeah, and it's coming out on Disney Plus June 22nd.
June 22nd, yep. The day before my wedding, so I can squease in one viewing before.
You got to see Anson Mount again on Disney Plus.
And then Moon Knight just finished about around the same time, right? I think it was the same week as the premiere of Doctor Strange. So we've had a month off.
It feels longer for us as well. Not that we're gloating or anything, but because we saw those first 4 episodes so early, that it does take more time to catch up, and then when you kind of get back on it does feel even longer in terms of like that period of time of watching the first 4 to the final couple of episodes, and then getting to the next thing. And then in between all that, we've already gotten trailers for Thor: Love and Thunder, a new trailer that kind of reveals Christian Bale's Gore the God Butcher, and then
we've got 2 trailers which we haven't talked about since we've recorded.
And then She-Hulk: Attorney at Law, which is going to be the next series, which is going to be in August. So there, even though we haven't gotten anything between Doctor Strange and Moon Knight, we still have gotten a lot of Marvel content, in terms of previewing what's to come.
Yes, absolutely. As I'm looking up if the first 2 episodes are premiering, Eric, let's kick it over to you. What did you think of these first 2 episodes of Ms. Marvel?
Well, again, to preface this with having just watched, Moon Knight not too long ago, and even Stranger Things season 4, I found this to be a breath of fresh air, a light, easy, enjoyable watch that never overstays its welcome. The lead in this show, Iman Vellani, is incredible on this show.
Toronto's own
Markham, right?
Yeah.
She
I just lump it all together. It's easier.
The greater GTA. She really does put the CanCon and Kamala Khan, but at the same time, you feel that like this bit of casting is on par with some of the best of the Marvel Studio stuff. Like, I think she's right up there with Robert Downey Jr. in Iron Man in terms of her likability, her effortless kind of quality in the performance of being a high schooler. And I almost feel that this, like, for anybody that was critical of Spider-Man No Way Home not being like Homecoming, this kind of feels closer to those first two Spider-Man movies, where
absolutely.
the animation style is very bombastic. It's
the high school vibe.
It's hyper stylized and kinetic, but it works because it's from the perspective of a teenager,
Kamala,
a teenager who, is a Pakistani American living in Jersey City, who is kind of, always being sort of put upon by her parents, who are overprotective, but at the same time really do love her. And then also kind of her making decisions of what she wants to do with her life, and also being an avid, I was gonna say comic book fan, but in this is
Marvel
reality.
Fangirl.
Yeah. And so, like, even the
Avengers fangirl.
Yeah. So, like, one of the episodes takes place at Avenger Con, and like there's stuff there that I think we could get into sort of nitpicking in terms of what the character is allowed to do and what she isn't allowed to do, and why certain characters, like her mother specifically, is so guarded with her, which is kind of, again, I don't know if it's maybe a cultural thing that's kind of going over my head a little bit.
I think so, yeah.
But I do feel like the things that she's into are the things you would want your child to be into. Like, she's not, drinking or doing drugs. She's not getting into trouble. She's into history within the context of this universe,
of this world. But I can also see it of being like known as this, like, the Avengers, I think, are still a divisive. I know they saved the universe at this point and they're all hailed as heroes, but it's almost something as silly as going back to when we were kids of certain people I knew not being able to like Power Rangers or stuff with violence, right?
But
so
Power Rangers weren't real, though. Like, in this world, these characters are real.
Sure, but it's like us idolizing like the army or something like that, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I just think of, like, I could see some, whether it's cultures or parents or something like that, viewing it as these violent people kind of thing. Like, you shouldn't idolize these people, even if they save the universe. Because, like, I feel like even, in the history of the MCU, the Avengers have done a lot of good, but the whole thing about Civil War, which I know you're not a huge fan of, but like, I like how they build in that the Avengers don't only do good things. They ultimately help in the end and probably save the universe or the world or whatever, but there's a lot of collateral damage and bad things that they do. So I understand that standpoint. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah. And again, like, I think the strongest stuff comes from the character interactions. Kamala also has a best friend named Bruno, who we can talk about.
We can talk about him, yeah.
And he's kind of almost like her cosplay Q in a lot of ways. Like, and there's this interesting relationship that's there. They actually bring in a lot of conversation about the historical backdrop of Pakistan specifically, and what went on in Karachi, and sort of colonialism, and there are elements there where it's like, oh, this is interesting because it is trying to be authentic, even if there are, some people will say that there's too much virtue signaling or something like that. But I think that there is enough there culturally, but also at the same time, we had criticisms with Moon Knight and how it incorporates sort of social commentary into the storyline, mental illness specifically with Moon Knight. Here, there's some stuff with terrorism and the FBI, and references to sort of security, homeland security, and things like that might be a little bit tricky for a show like this that is a Marvel based show that's like, certain groups are spying on mosques and stuff like that. That's kind of like, it's tough terrain when you are looking at this as entertainment first and foremost, and it also being a superhero show. So
but
far,
I think the crew and the cast involved, I
been
think,
very
like,
respectful, and again, like, it's not going out of its way to do something that will offend, but at the same time, you have to bring these things up. I think my biggest nitpick is that, so the mom in this situation is very protective of her daughter, that to the point where she doesn't want her to go out anywhere. She's trying to get her driver's license, Kamala, and she wants to go to this Avengers Con event in the first episode. This isn't really spoiler because you've seen stuff of that in the trailer. The thing I found a little bit weird was that you have this scene where the parents are kind of like, okay, like, we're doing this for your own good. We don't want you, getting mixed up with the wrong people or
Yeah.
something bad happening to you. But then the next scene, it's her at Bruno's place, and Bruno lives above this convenience store,
She's
and
got a dope apartment.
it's at night. They're alone on top of the rooftop, and it kind of feels like, okay, well, you had this whole thing about, like, you have to be
Not going out
careful.
at night, but she
Exactly.
trusts
And
him
she
going out to
bikes
Bruno's.
everywhere,
Yeah.
and so it kind of felt like
Yeah.
that was a little bit weird as well. And
I understand.
and they're
that,
also
yeah.
not supervised, because I don't know, like, what Bruno's home life is
Seems like he lives
either.
by himself.
Yeah.
It seems like it. And then there was some weird editing there too at Bruno, where he was like, it was night and then it was day where Kamala was, and then it was night again when she met up with him, and I couldn't figure out the timeline. Anyways, that's just nitpicky stuff. I really loved these first 2 episodes. Like, I agree with you that it was this breath of fresh air, not only for some of the TV I've been watching lately, but also just the MCU. Like, it feels uh not lower stakes, but it feels a little bit more personal, whether it's exploring Kamala's culture or her home life. And just this kind of, it's something I've always loved about Spider-Man, that high school vibe of that friendly neighborhood kind of superhero. Like, nothing feels like world ending right now, or too, like, obviously it's very cosmic. We'll get into her powers and different things like that, even though they haven't really explored that too much yet. But and then she's just so incredibly charming. Like, Iman Vellani, like, I think absolutely crushes it, and I kind of believe her as Kamala Khan instantly. Instantly fall in love with her and her group of friends, and how she is at school, and just kind of their outside life of school, her home life. I thought her relationship with her brother was awesome. I love that kind of disconnect between the generations of of these people who immigrated into the U.S., and then each generation gets a little bit more American, right? But then they still have all this history and past and culture that they've inherited from their parents. And I feel like the
And
show
also there's
does such
conflicts within that too, right?
exactly. And then that's what I really love, is like, is that conflict, and that examination of that, and of being a Pakistani American, and being a young woman, and how her and her brother are very different from her parents, but it's still very important to them, of their religion and their history, and their culture, and bringing that into something that feels so refreshing into the MCU. And then on top of that, the style of the show, I think, just completely works. Like, it reminded me of things, obviously, of recent memory of Turning Red. Is very like, they're very similar in being about young women, and their families, and things like that,
And also
gaining
having,
powers,
like,
and like,
and a power that maybe someone else within the family knows something about, but
yes,
they're not revealing it.
very similar to Turning
Yeah.
Red, and that maximalism, kind of like in your face, stylistic kind of
High
flourishes throughout
schoolers
the
as
whole
well.
thing. Yeah, it's very similar to Turning Red, but then obviously Mitchell's versus the Machines, Scott Pilgrim, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and then you already mentioned Homecoming as well. Like, it really reminded me of that, the comedy and the vibe of that first Spider-Man Homecoming movie. And then the stylistic flourishes that reminded me of those movies that I just mentioned. Like, I thought they were so well done, in the sense of, like, being almost completely in the background, and didn't feel like the way that they represent text messages, and how Kamala is feeling and stuff, and how it's represented on screen. Like, it never feels like obnoxious or kind of too much. Like, it always feels organic. And whether it's using, text bubbles, like, on the thing, or how murals in the background will move with Kamala's narration, or what she's talking about. And, like, I just found myself completely engrossed with both the style and the lead character. And then on top of that, it's very MCU as well. Like, there's references galore. Obviously, the Avengers Con, Kamala is an Avengers fangirl, much like all the people watching these shows and movies are. So I feel like that instantly makes you connect with her, because she idolizes Captain Marvel and Iron Man and Hulk, and you get all these references. Her friends dressing like Tony Stark, cosplaying, and it's just
Or
funny.
Bruce
And, like,
Banner.
or Bruce Banner and things like that. And, like, it's just it was so delightful. And then I just felt like it was just, I had a smile on my face the whole time. There wasn't, even in these first two episodes, like really a villain or even like a big conflict that she was dealing with. It was just Kamala getting her powers and trying to understand those, and then also dealing with her home life and her friends. And I just thought it was like really awesome, these first two episodes.
Yeah, it's all about sort of the minor conflicts that are bigger when you are from the perspective of a kid, because your worldview, is somewhat skewed when you're younger, right? Like the big conflict is not being able to go to a party because your parents say no, or not being able to drive somewhere because you don't have your license yet. These are relatable everyday conflicts that make this world being kind of more grounded in how the stories are being told, and even just the idea of fandom from the point of view of a person of color and what that means to somebody and how they see themselves, and the confidence that they get of being a part of the fandom and being accepted, and also thinking to themselves that do they belong and where do they belong, because there's even a great conversation between her and her friend about ethnicity, and whether one group accepts you or doesn't, and the other one is the same way, where there's kind of this divide. And I think that is really great. And like what I love, to your point, with there's no real antagonist in the first two episodes, the real antagonist is colonialism,
Yeah.
and the British, which again, like historically speaking, it brings in enough to kind of educate you. But if you want to learn more about it, like actually spend some time looking at like what happened in that period that they're referencing. But it is a good kind of like introduction. And I think the thing that makes this also a much more accessible watch than, say, Moon Knight, is that kids can watch this. I think that
Yeah.
it's not too violent in the way that Moon Knight does have some very graphic imagery. And I mentioned this in the tweet, in my reaction tweet, is that it reminded me of something that you would have watched on Nickelodeon or YTV in the mid to late 90s, early 2000s. Something that maybe wouldn't be on at like, say, 8 or 9, but something that would be on like in the zone sort of prime time
After
programming after
school.
school,
Yeah.
like something like The Secret World of Alex Mack, or
Yeah.
The Adventures of Shirley Holmes, like something
Yeah.
like that. It has that kind of quality that, I mean, I guess like even something like Ben 10, even though I'm not really that familiar with it, but like it has that kind of style, but it has a much more bigger budget.
Bigger budget. Yeah.
I also like, again, that Marvel is incorporating more sort of cultural resonance within the MCU. We've seen it with Shang-Chi, we've seen it with Black Panther, we're now seeing it with
And Moon
Ms.
Knight
Marvel
even.
and Moon Knight. I also kind of find it interesting and weirdly comical that characters are now getting powers through, you know, rings or
Magical
bangles.
wrangles. Yeah.
Yeah, like I will if Namor gets his power from a puka shell necklace, I will
Yeah.
give
Love
that
it.
movie 5 stars.
Yeah.
But it just is interesting how like sort of artifacts and ancient objects are
In
also
history,
in
right? Yeah.
history, are kind of now being incorporated in sort of revisionist history, even, and sort of how we see things and how we perceive see things differently through the eyes of somebody else, and sort of have that empathy towards somebody who experiences it from a different point of view. And again, talking about fandom being accepting, we'll probably talk about this on the regular show if we do a review of Obi-Wan. Like there's been a lot of conversations, like the way that like toxic fandom has been with Star
Mm-hmm.
Wars, and how that has become more of a problem when it comes to liking something. But I think that this is actually tackling some of those issues within this storyline. And like you mentioned, I really loved her brother and their
Yeah.
relationship, and almost him kind of being weirdly like a second dad because he's much older than her,
Yes.
and like just that. And
And understanding American culture a little bit more, and just like being a younger person in today's day and
but
age
also
and
the
stuff like
divide
that.
because
And
he's
like,
a male,
yeah.
right? And
Yeah,
like,
that's
and
true
he
too.
gets
Where
away with
they
more,
with
and
more
is able to
because of
do
that.
more
Yeah.
because of
That's a
that.
great point.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love your point about the Nickelodeon and YTV thing. Cause like I never made that connection, but right when you said it, I completely understood what you were saying, and we mean that as a compliment, because I feel like saying that might sound like, oh, that means it's corny or cheesy, and it does have elements of that, of being a sort of a kids show, and it's not a kid show. It's still very much an MCU movie show kind of thing. Like, I still think if you love the MCU, you're going to find a lot to really, really like in this. And, but it does have that kind of early 2000s kind of vibe of something we would have watched after school. And that's so awesome for the MCU. And I feel like that's in what we love most, is when they branch out and kind of find these subgenres to tackle. And even though this is still very much a superhero show, and it's an origin story and all that stuff, it's going to have those beats, but like, it's finding a way to differentiate itself, and whether it's through, the cultural aspect, or from a different kind of, okay, we're going to make this a little bit more for kids, but it's still going to be accessible to everyone. And then going back to Kamala's powers, and like we've mentioned it, like, it's just her dealing with like kind of getting these powers, and just kind of like what's going on in her life. It's not like a big thing that's happening where
The
she has
world's
to
not
stop it.
ending.
And I'm sure it'll
Yeah.
get to that point, or like something a little bit bigger than what's happening now.
Well, it'll
like,
lead into the Marvels, right? Like, that kind of
yes.
feels like that'll be the bridge between Ms. Marvel and the Marvels, is that she'll be recruited and become a part of the Avengers and a part of the team. And that's where, like, her neighborhood, her city, her community gets even bigger, in the way that she even talks about Captain Marvel in that opening sort of collage monologue, where, Captain Marvel was someone who disappeared for such a long period of time on Earth, and what was she doing? Well, she was probably saving other planets, and the way that Captain Marvel even talked about that in the Avengers movies, where like it's the
which
Avengers
is awesome.
doesn't
That's great
exist
world
everywhere
building.
else.
It's great world building. And then
even little moments. I wanted to quickly mention the thing I like the most, I think, is where Kamala and Bruno, specifically Kamala, is sort of coming up with a plan to escape her house and go to Avengers Con. And what I found fascinating with this is that she creates this kind of heist on a blackboard, and in the opening,
execution of that is great.
Well, the execution is great, but thinking where she got that from is probably in the opening monologue, when she references listening to the Scott Lang podcast. And thinking like, okay, like that's probably, again, like when you're a kid, you absorb so much of your influences and the way that you act and behave through the things that you love. And that really does come through.
Absolutely. I thought her powers looked really dope. Like, I know some people were really worried about that, because they changed her powers from what they are in the comics. So like,
what are they in the comics?
They're more like her, kind of like Mr. Fantastic, where she her body actually stretches and moves, and basically she can grow her hand to be super large into a giant fist, and like her body is actually morphing and doing the things, where in this,
which that would have actually been better as like a puberty reference or a metaphor.
Totally, but I think because of Fantastic Four coming up soon, that the powers are a little too similar, to the point where they probably wanted to differentiate them and probably make them more connected to Captain Marvel a little bit, where I like that they're a little bit more cosmic in this, and a little bit more Green Lantern-y, where it's almost like this bangle that she wears is kind of like a Green Lantern ring, where she can kind of create anything she imagines, with this cosmic power in this bangle. So whether it's like platforms she can jump on, or they have the very classic Miss Marvel like giant fist kind of thing, but it's in this kind of, very hot right now, the pink and blue kind of,
it's almost like a diamond, or like,
yeah,
like it has like a stone encrusted kind of quality, and it's mostly
and it
triggered
cool
in like dire situations, or when she like, because she's still learning how to use these powers, and like the history of them, I'm sure, is going to be explained in the next couple of episodes. But that's another thing as well. I think you can be more forgiving with an origin story that you're not as familiar with a character, like someone like Batman, who you've seen in multiple iterations. You don't need to see that story over and over again. No, exactly. Where with this, it's like, okay, I'm not really that familiar with Miss Marvel's backstory, so at least it's kind of refreshing from the point of view of, at least it's a new character that you haven't seen much of, if any, outside of the comic books at all. So like that kind of also helps as well. And the guys who directed Bad Boys for Life directed the first. Was it the first 2 episodes or the
Yeah,
first
the
episode?
first and the finale. So Adil El Arbi and Bilal Falal are the directors, and they directed the premiere, and then Mira Manon directed the second episode, and then it kind of Mira Manon directs the third one. Then Charmin Obai Shinoy directs 4 and 5, and then the Bad Boys for Life directors come back and do the finale.
And they're also the Bad Boys for Life guys, Adil and Bilal. They also directed Batgirl, which is kind of interesting as
Yes,
well.
they did. Yeah, I forgot that they are the ones doing Batgirl. So they're doing both. They got
They
the
got that
James
DC
Gunn
and
effect.
Marvel
Yeah,
money.
they got the James Gunn effect where they're going. They're swinging. I guess that other dude that directed, the big ones, but we won't talk about him. But yeah, that's really cool.
We
I'm
still
very
talk about
curious to
Bruno
see.
though.
We do, especially in this. So that's cool that they're doing. I can't wait to see Brendan Fraser in that and Michael Keaton. But yeah, man, I thought they did a great job. Like I thought both episodes were really, really solid. I hope it I know it will lead into the Marvels, but like I do hope it kind of stays at this lower level. Like I don't necessarily need it to be this big event that's going to attack Jersey or New York or something like that. Like I hope it's something a little bit more personal to
Lower
Kamala and some
stakes.
lower stakes, that like it's big stakes for her, but not necessarily big stakes for the universe or the city or anything like that, because I feel like she will get that in the Marvels, right? Like,
Yeah.
so
Or
I
if you're
feel
gonna
like
if this is a continuing series, get bigger or elevate the stakes as
sure,
you go along. Like that's why again Homecoming works so well, because Homecoming there still are like the Michael Keaton character in that is very threatening as Vulture, but at the same time
very
it felt like
personal to Peter. Yeah.
it kind of felt like, okay, well, Peter's also worrying about, the prom, and Peter's also
Yeah.
worrying about his Aunt May, and also thinking about like what's he going to do, post high school, and also now having Tony Stark in his life as a mentor and kind of surrogate uncle. And so like those things all play a role. And the same thing with, with Kamala. Like it feels like there are things like, okay, being accepted within her community, but also finding time to enjoy high school, especially if she's in her senior year, having a crush on somebody and
Yeah.
like working through that, and also just figuring out like, again, like, does she want to
Does
live
Riz
in
Ahmed exist in the
Yes,
MCU?
yes. So that's another thing. So
Sorry, I
so
didn't mean to cut you
there's a
off.
reference to the Sweatshop
Sweatshop
Boys,
Boys, yeah.
which Riz Ahmed is a part of the group as
You
MC
hear him
Riz.
in this, like you hear his voice,
And so thinking that also that Riz Ahmed was in Venom, and then the
which
director
is
of
technically part of the MCU.
yes, and then the director of Mogul Mowgli is directing Blade. So it's like this weird like imploding universe.
And
But
he could
yeah,
possibly be in Blade because of that. We don't, who
yeah, but
knows,
as
but
Riz
like,
Ahmed.
yeah, that would be great.
But yeah, but going back to just like, again, like there's this whole sort of thing where the mom is talking about how, do you want to be like your great grandmother, like living in the clouds and fantasizing all the time, or do you want to be here and embrace who you are? And it's like, well, why can't you
Do
do both?
both.
And like I
Yeah.
kind of feel like that's going to be like finding the balance between the two.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. Yeah, I'm all in. I think it is like I needed something a little bit lower stakes. I needed something a little bit more fun, especially after Multiverse of Madness and Moon Knight, and I'm excited with Ms. Marvel and what seems to be Thor: Love and Thunder. I mean, obviously, Gore the God Butcher is a dark villain, but with Taika directing and how colorful and funny I'm sure that movie will be, like we're in that lighter stage of the MCU right now, which is kind of nice. And I'm very, very excited for more Ms. Marvel. I can't wait to watch more.
Yeah, I'm in that same category where it just felt like I was having fun again with the MCU, and that it wasn't all doom and gloom. Even the build up to, like, as much as I love WandaVision, there's a lot there to process in terms of trauma and
Yeah.
grief and emotions, where this there are things that are serious, and to kind of again think about, but at the same time it's not afraid to have fun, and it's not afraid to take it from the point of view of a child, and or not a child, but a teenager, and
Yeah.
be sort of open to, you know, making the tone feel like it is coming from the point of view of a teenager. And like that is something that it works here. Like if this were to be the same sort of style or aesthetic for Iron Man or Thor, I don't know if it would work as well, and it
No,
might be
yeah.
obnoxious, but because it is coming from the point of view of a young woman, it works. And like,
Yeah.
again, like it's just more relatable because, you know,
I
you've either
yeah.
gone through it or going through it or will be going through it, and so that makes it more fun, but also emotionally invests you in this world.
Yeah. I want to give a special shout out. I love the guy who plays her guidance counselor. I loved those scenes. There is a character that shows up here that I was surprised to see. I don't know if that person's been in any trailers or anything. I have some theories about that. That was interesting. And the one last thing I want to say is like I loved this character so much. It made me very excited for either a Young Avengers or just I can't wait until Kamala, Kate Bishop, and Peter Parker kind of like all share a scene together because I think those three are just so good. Like I didn't love Hawkeye, but I love Haley Steinfeld so much, and I think she's so great as Kate Bishop that I like those New York based characters that are a little bit younger. Like I think that'll be a lot of fun. Whether you do Young Avengers, and you could even have Peter Parker be a part of. You know, he's obviously a veteran when it comes to all of this stuff, but
Well,
like
you'll
having
also
him,
have
but like.
Ant-Man's daughter coming up as
Yep.
well, right? Like
They're definitely leading
Caitlin
into Young
Newton.
Avengers, and I don't know whether Kamala being part of that or not because of her being part of the Marvels, but I would love to see a Young Avengers, whether it's a show or a movie, and I'm very curious to see how this leads into the Marvels or even Secret Invasion, right? Because I feel like Secret Invasion with having Nick Fury being a huge part of that, and obviously Nick Fury, I think he's also confirmed for the Marvels that like I think all those three things will tie in to one another quite a bit. So I'm curious to see how that all kind of plays out. But
And what the
um,
overall game plan is. Like
yeah,
again, we, you know, there was when Kevin Feige kind of like was building up to something, there was always like, okay, we're going to get an Avengers film, or we're
yeah.
going to
Well,
get
right now
like it just kind of feels like, okay, this could go anywhere. Like we could do Young Avengers, we could do the Midnight Suns or whatever. We could do
it's
all,
really interesting,
yeah.
yeah. And like we talk about this every time we review an MCU thing, but like it. I guess the biggest thing, which I think we can talk about now because it's been long enough, is the post-credit scene for Shang-Chi, right? Like that was the one where it seems like it was the thing that was leading into whatever the big thing was, right? Because you had Captain Marvel show up, you had Bruce Banner show up,
It said
and he
welcome
was
to the team, right?
team, and you also had Wong showing like some sort of cosmic thing, like a the rings in Shang-Chi set off something, and whether that's connected to the Bengal here in Ms. Marvel, or like maybe you had a great point, Eric, of like there are all these items, historical items, whether that plays into the multiverse or whether that plays into like it
Like the
seems like
Book of Ashanti.
there's a bunch of different threads right now where it clearly looks like they're leading into multiverse stuff, whether that's Secret Wars or whatever. And then you have the other side, Young Avengers. You have Midnight Suns, like you mentioned, but Secret Invasion's obviously going to be a big thing. And it's curious because like we're now, what I know the pandemic kind of threw a wrench into things, so
Well,
we're
the
like
continuity, right, in terms of how things were being released.
that
Like even
and
Doctor
just
Strange was supposed to come before Spider-Man No Way Home, right?
yes. And if you just look at the MCU where it is now, we're almost on year 15, right? Like and
Jesus.
by year 10 of the MCU, we already kind of we were leading into Infinity War and Endgame, right? So
There was
like
always an end
um
game in sight, right? Like
yeah.
there was always something, you were always building to that final battle. Where this, they haven't revealed that yet. Yeah, we're getting a Thor movie coming up, She-Hulk, a Black Panther sequel, and then the Marvels is coming. Blade is supposed to be shooting this summer.
But it all
Fantastic
feels very
Four,
individual right now,
yes.
right? Like and I think that's where some people, and I think that's fine.
I do
It's just
too.
you set the expectation for people that this is all interconnected and it leads to a bigger story. Like even if it's like an Avenger movie every they were every 3 years or something like
Yeah,
that. We
but
got an
even now
Avengers
though, you
movie,
can do
but
the
like
multiverse thing
yeah,
where you can have multiple characters team up, and it's maybe not the big battle like an
yeah.
Avengers battle, but it's kind of like the next
You
best
pair
thing. It's
two or
the
three of them,
penultimate
right? Yeah.
battle.
Or something like that. Like we're getting a lot of pairs, and I feel like or people showing up in another property from another franchise or another movie. It's just like, is it leading to a new Avengers movie? Because Kevin Feige always said like Endgame was the last Avengers movie, and I'm like, okay, you could just call it New Avengers like they do in the comics, and then you're like, it's not an Avengers movie, it's the
We don't
New
want to get it
Avengers.
confused with New Mutants either.
Yeah. Or Secret Avengers. And there's all those, like, what I'm fascinated, we're getting off the rails, but I think every time a new MCU thing comes out, we kind
It's
of
another piece of the
we do
puzzle,
this.
right?
Yes. And like there were that rumors, remember Chris Evans like signed on to come back like as Captain America, that hasn't officially been announced, but like Deadline and Variety reported on that he signed a deal to come back and play Captain America again.
Well, there's
Whether
also
that
the Captain
um
America movie with Anthony
so
Mackie that's in
so does
development,
Chris
right?
Evans, a multiverse version of him play a factor into that? There were rumors that he might be playing the Hydra version of Captain America from the multiverse or whatever, right? And like that could be cool. Or you do a prequel movie of him during his time with Black Widow, during when they were the Secret Avengers with Falcon, in between Infinity War and Endgame. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff you could go, and like I don't know where it goes, but I'm excited. And it's we say this all the time, like I'm most interested when they're doing something different, and like it is nice when they're, it has to be familiar. And even Miss Marvel is familiar. It's an origin story. We've seen the teenage superhero thing before. There are a lot of things that feel unique about it, and it feels like its own thing. And you know when they just start doing the same thing over and over again, it starts to get a little derivative and a little kind of stale. And so far, so good. I feel like more often than not, they've tried to do something different, and it usually works. But um, they fumbled here and there. Like I didn't love Moon Knight, I didn't love Eternals. So like I feel like What If even I didn't really care that much about. So like they can still fumble a little bit, but at least they're kind of taking swings. And I'm Thor will be familiar and fun, but I'm excited to see. There are rumors with the Fantastic Four. They're still trying to find a new director there. The latest rumor, I think, was that they want a big name for it, like they
Well, they want a genre
like
director, right? Because they
and
had such a success with Sam Raimi coming back, so it's like
I
we
think it
want
was
somebody.
genre. I thought it was just someone who was established so they didn't have to kind of babysit them, because Marvel got into like a thing where Kevin Feige is the one running the show, right? So they
Yeah,
hire a lot of up and comers, and then they have to get a B team that shoots a lot of the action, and then
Kevin Feige is Galactus in this situation.
essentially, right? So I think with the Sam Raimi thing, what everyone was saying is like he enjoyed that because he could just let Raimi do it, because Raimi's been doing this for a long time. He's done big superhero movies.
But
He's
Raimi's
done
also a
biggest
company
movie.
guy. Like
Yeah, totally.
he's
So I
gonna
think
ride the
that's the
line.
kind of guy that they want to find, or girl or woman, is just like they want to find someone, I think, that will still play it within what they want them to do, but almost established enough where they can kind of like, all right, let them go and just and make Fantastic Four without having to hold their hand throughout the whole thing. And like, holding someone's hand works sometimes too when you hire
Like
an
Lady
up
Gaga
an up
or
and
Hootie and the
coming filmmaker.
Blowfish.
An up and coming filmmaker or something like that. I'm fat. I can't like. That's why I think
Well, because that was
I'm.
the thing, right? Recruit somebody who just had like a Sundance movie that was like their first or second film, and then get them to do a Marvel movie or a Jurassic Park film or a blockbuster of some kind. But now it seems like, okay, well, some of the best stuff that they've been making Marvel wise, anyways, has been when they've hired someone like Shane Black, Sam Raimi, or James Gunn to direct these movies.
Yeah,
Even Chloe Zhao, which we didn't love the Eternals. I mean, she's no slouch, so it's like
but she
hire
put her own
somebody.
stamp on it and she knew what she was doing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
hire somebody that has the experience and
and
doesn't need to like but again, like that's the other thing. It's like some directors are very picky when it comes to like they're going to want final cut, and they're not going to get
or
it.
a
It's
little
going to be
bit more decision. Kevin
Feige's
Feige.
Kevin Feige's
I
final
agree.
cut. So,
And I think that like with the amount of stuff they're making, he's probably realizing that he's probably spread pretty thin, and he needs to let people go off and make it without him being involved in every step of the way. It's ultimately going to be his say at the end of the day, like you just said, but I feel like he maybe with some of these newer people, it's a learning curve, right? And it probably takes a little bit more time to get them acclimated to a big gigantic budget movie, and then you usually have someone else shooting all the action sequences and things like that. So yeah, I'm fascinated to see who they'll get for Fantastic Four. I'm sure they tried to get Krasinski, and he probably was like, maybe I'll act in it, but I don't know if I want to direct it. Because he seems like the guy who's done, a couple big movies now, and seems like the obvious choice without giving too much away of certain movies. But like
that or Anson Mount.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Are we getting that Inhumans reboot or what?
I mean,
No,
who
we're
knows?
not.
I mean, he's doing quite well on the new.
Oh,
Star
he's
Trek
killing
series,
it. Yeah.
So.
I mean, I don't watch the new Star Trek, but New Frontiers, is that what it's called? But I've heard he's good in it.
It's Captain
and
Pike.
Anyways, we're getting way off track.
But you know
Miss
what?
Marvel's.
I think like the other thing. I mean, again, we've only seen 2 episodes, but what I also really like about Vellani is I feel like she is much more comfortable as the character than say Brie Larson was as Captain Marvel in that first movie. Where again, I don't want to like Brie Larson. Obviously, is Brie Larson. She's great. She's an Oscar winner. She's done good work, but it really did feel like she was being kind of thrown into a situation where she didn't have time to really kind of connect with the character or find that ground, and it kind of felt awkward. I mean, on top of also again the toxic fandom of male fans specifically, but with Vellani, like it just feels like obviously like they're using the whole narrative of her like dressing up as Miss Marvel for Halloween that one year and being a true fan, but like it really does feel like as soon as you see her and you kind of get to know her in that first episode, that it just kind of feels like the character and the performance click completely in a way that it just
You
never
immediately
really
buy
gelled
in.
with
Yeah.
Brie Larson and Captain Marvel.
Yeah. But I'm excited for the 3 of them in the Marvels. Like, I think that will be, and Nia DaCosta is great too. So like, I'm definitely down for that. So I'm excited. We got 4 more episodes left. It'll be weekly. I did confirm it's just the first episode on Wednesday, and then it'll be weekly after that. So
And the CanCon stuff as well. Simu Liu.
So much Toronto and CanCon. Yeah.
Iman Vellani and then Tatiana Maslany. So it's like, yeah, you're just getting literally like Canadian actors.
Yeah, like local Toronto people to be like,
we knew
think
them win.
Maybe. Yeah, I think Tatiana might be. Is she from Toronto or Vancouver? I forget. But
I think she was born in Western Canada, but then moved to
because
Toronto.
a lot of Orphan Black was shot here and stuff, right? And then we'll talk about those trailers on the most recent Untitled Movie podcast. So we'll talk about She-Hulk. We'll talk about Thor. We missed the Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning trailer and a bunch of other stuff.
How dare you forget that amazing title?
It's amazing. So go check that out as well. One-stop shop for everything. Head over to Letterboxd at Untitled_movies. All of our links to our video reviews and podcasts are over there. As always, my name is Matt Rohrbeck. You can find more of my work around the internet, but mostly at UntitledMoviePodcast.com. And you can follow me on all those social medias at Matt Rohrbeck.
And I'm Eric Marchin. You can find more of my video reviews on RogersTV.com/CinemaScene and on the social medias at EM6211.
Until next time.
Miss Marvel joins the Avengers, and the Avengers being the New Jersey superheroes Bon Jovi, The Boss, and The Sopranos.
Okay. All right.